Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Thank you very much for coming to this session. I just want to start with introducing myself. My name is Anders Wevenhold, and I work as a senior program manager for Microsoft on a team we call the CAT team. And the CAT team is tasked with traveling around the world, talking to some of our close customers and bridging what customers they experience and the way they're using their products, and take that feedback and give it back to engineering so we can take some of that understanding on how customers uses our products around the world, and how, based on the feedback we're getting from these customers, we can make even better products going forward. Now, we do this with different products, and mainly over the past 5 years, I've worked on System Center, Windows Server, and lastly, Windows Azure Pack, and then as a natural follow-up on that to Windows Azure Stack. In the past, year and a half, we've been working together with Tieto, who's a host in Finland, on actually implementing Azure Stack into their data center. So today I have Johnny with me. I don't know if you want to say a few words about yourself, Johnny?
Yeah, so my name is Johnny Leskinen, and I'm coming from Tieto. I will have a short introduction about Tieto in a couple of minutes. I'm a lead architect in our cloud platform unit, which is responsible for handling the private and public clouds.
So today, as some of you probably have seen if you read the abstract before coming here, we want to share some of the learnings that we got from implementing Azure Stack into Tieto in their data center. There are many things you need to sit down and plan and think about when you install Azure Stack, as it is going to be coupled into your infrastructure. So today we want to talk about the goals of implementing that, as well as give you some guidance, of course, as well. So if you're thinking about installing Azure Stack or kicking the tires on it, what was Tieto's experience on this? And also, how can you get some quick starts and some hints and tips on how to have this implemented into the data center itself? So those are really the things that we want you to leave, or the takeaways, in this session. So we just quickly, not that we're going to go very detailed over it, but the agenda is really, of course, as a start, just give you a quick idea of who is Tieto, what do they do for a living. So kind of setting the scene for why they want Azure Stack, which will then be the next topic. But then we have different areas that we work with as part of installing Azure Stack. Of course, the core platform is very essential, but also looking at business IT services that John will talk more about. Security compliance is, in many cases, very hard for a lot of companies. And then, of course, at the end here, talk about how Tieto is planning on operating Azure Stack. Just to show us of hands, how many of you are hostess? Okay, and how many are enterprises? And what do we have, consultants, SIs? Okay, thank you very much. Just to giving us an idea with where we are. Well, let's get started with the agenda. I just want to hand it over to Johnny. That's going to take us through who Tieto is and why they're doing Azure Stack.
Yeah, thank you, Anders. So Tieto is an IT service provider in the Nordics. So we mainly operate in Finland, Sweden, and Norway. And we have 3 business areas. We have the hosting side. I'm from the hosting side. We have application services. And then we have a quite big ISV side of the business. And Azure Stack actually combines all of those 3, so it matters all of them. So you can see the numbers from our hosting side. So we operate 40,000 servers, 15,000 servers in the clouds, mainly private ones. Then our customers, they are energies, financial services, banks, different manufacturing companies. Basically, they are almost the biggest companies in the Nordics. Not the small one, but the bigger one. So they have a certain kind of requirements what we have to comply. So why Azure Stack? So we have been using Azure 5 to 6 years. We operate 150 subscriptions. I don't remember what's our consumption right now. So our developers like to use Azure. But there's always a discussion with the customers, can they use Azure or not? They might have some compliance needs or security needs or just some kind of rules that say that they cannot use Azure, but they would like to use it. So that's why Azure Stack is a good fit for it. So developers can still use Azure technologies, and we are still compliant with the customer requirements that we cannot send the data to the public cloud or something like that. So Azure Stack is a good fit for a new application deployments. You start from scratch or you do the new deployment, that's good for it. And of course, dev and testing. Today, developers want to consume resources. When they need something, they will just order it and it's instant delivery or a couple of minutes delivery. No more waiting for days or even weeks. But Azure Stack, it's not good for virtualization platform. So if you run a Hyper-V environment today, or if you run a VMware environment today and you want to move everything on top of Azure Stack, don't do it. It's not designed to work with that kind of use cases. So there's a couple of slides coming later on that it explains why it's not good fit for that one. So from service provider point of view, Azure and Azure Stack, that when we sell our customer Azure services and Azure, so customers, we need to give the Azure services same way that we are offering other managed services from us or other capacity services from us. They also require certain additional services like subscription and license management or governance. They like way how we can give them an automated onboarding to Azure. They usually require billing and cost targeting or cost allocation. And definitely they need add-on services like managed antivirus or monitoring of the workloads or patching them when the patching is needed. So for us, Azure Stack is basically, from this perspective, just another Azure location. It's coming from our data centers, you get the same services. So same kind of value-added services are available also for Azure Stack. So the difference between Azure and private Azure as we see it is that there are some customer and country-specific requirements that the customer cannot use the Azure. A good example is the public sector. Not all public sector can use Azure, but there are certain data that they can put on the public clouds on Azure. So there are also demands for the lower latency. So the light can travel as fast as it can, so we cannot do anything on it. There are some application that requires really fast connectivity or low latency between customer location and where the application is running. So that's one need. SLA. They might require different SLAs what the Azure can offer. So we can offer them a little bit different SLAs based on their needs. And also, sometimes they might require a dedicated environment for the licensing perspective. There are certain vendors, other vendors outside that requires that the whole environment is dedicated to a specific customer. So then Azure Stack is a good fit. So I have two examples from our ISV side of business that help, who are using or developing their offering on top of Azure Stack. So one example is Public 360. So this is a case and document management software for the public and the private sector. It's mainly for the offered to the public one. So right now, our latest version is based on Azure. It's a multi-tenant, and it runs 100 customers at the moment. 100 different customers are in the same multi-tenant platform. We also have our old version of this application, which is running on Azure back, and it's a single tenant. With Azure Stack, we can use the same code, same architecture, same investment to do the private cloud version of this application. So it will give us savings, and the developers are happy because they can use the same tool, same mechanisms, and so on. So for this, Azure is a good fit. Then we have a little bit bigger service called Tieto Smart Utilities. So this is it's a service for our customer, for our energy customers. It will handle like electricity consumption metering and invoicing and stuff like that. So we have a history of doing this application for, I think, past 25 years. So we have a lot of legacy on it. And 3 years ago, we started to develop a new version of it, and we chose Azure to be the place where we are going to do it. We have spent quite amount of money and time and resources to do the Azure version of it. Now we need to also have the private cloud version for some reasons. It's and that's Azure Stack is good fit because we can reuse the investment. Small changes, we can get this service running on Azure Stack and met all the customer requirements. So we started the Azure Stack project or program or whatever, I think almost 2 years ago when the TP1 was released. We tested the TP1 installation and from there we started. And from that point we have continued with TP2. We start looking for how to do the IT operations. Now TP3 was released in the spring. We start looking for the architecture, how we're going to do the Azure Stack. And we're also looking for the compliance. And when the GA will be available for us, we will continue doing this kind of ISV application of how are we going to build our next generation application on top of Azure Stack. So high-level architecture. So when GI is available, it doesn't support multi-region. So this is a problem for us. So we need to, in the day one, support 3 countries, 3 locations, 3 different compliance rules. So that's why we have to deploy 3 different Azure Stacks in the beginning. It's the only way. There are some downsides, but at least we can make it happen. When the multi-region is available, there are certain kind of things what we can do with the multi-regions. For example, we could create a customer-dedicated Azure Stack, just having a customer's dedicated region. And with region, we can have a different kind of network connectivity. So Azure and Azure Stack, like I said earlier, there are services what we are serving. So we have this kind of private cloud offering we call Tier 1 Cloud, which includes all the private clouds and all the public clouds what we support. And Azure is our public cloud, and Azure Stack is going to be our private cloud in our data centers. But hey, we are also looking for could we run Azure Stack in customer locations? So customer has factory systems which needs to be near the factories. So putting Azure Stack over there might be a good fit for it. So we are investigating can we do it and how feasible it is. We chose to go with Dell. So right now we are deploying 8 node cluster with the biggest nodes. We estimate this will be the good fit for our needs. Talk to Dell. They will give you the why Dell. They will give you reasons. We have a long history with them, and they're easy to work with. So now let's jump to the technical details. So the networking, and this is really important to understand. So this is the one reason why this is not your virtualization platform. So the limitation are no L2 extensions. So meaning that you cannot bring your VLANs to Azure Stack. It's not doable. Okay, you can make some kind of virtual SDN top of Azure Stack and make it happen, but it's not feasible. No L3 forwarding. Only way to do the connectivity to customer network is using VPN connection. And no connection to the server. So you can only connect to top of rack switches. So they are basically routers. So there's a left side, there's a picture how we did it. So we have our Tor switches are connected to our routers, and we are using BGP to advertise certain networks. And by the default, it will require, I think, 4 networks. One is public address where the customers are accessing. Then there's an infrastructure network, storage network, and one network where it's not available from the outside of Azure Stack. So BGP is the way to go. I also recommend that put some kind of firewall or IPS devices on the front of the public IPs, because Azure developers can use Azure Stack. They can actually use the public IP addresses and do whatever. So they might accidentally create a security holes. So that's why putting some kind of device that can actually monitor the traffic, that if for example, one server is being hacked, you can see it and you can stop it. DNS and certificates. When you deploy Azure Stack, when you actually deploy multiple Azure Stacks, so you need to have a good naming convention. So it's for customers, it's easy to log into different Azure Stacks. So there's a lot of information on this slide, so download the copy and you can see it. But spend some time on the naming. And only way to get the Azure Stack working with the DNS is that you do the DNS delegation. Don't even try to do the that you manually create the A records. Do the delegation. That's the only way how it works. Of course, if you want to do some scripting with those records, fine. Certificates. There's a long list of the requirements for it. Look for it, and you have to buy a multiple wildcard certificates in order to get the Azure Stack installation done. We see Azure Stack that we need to manage in 3 different places. So we need to manage Azure Stack infrastructure. So it's a red network on this one. So there's a hardware vendor tool which monitors the hardware. It's important to monitor that one. There's admin portal and admin API that the operators will actually use to manage it. And we somehow need to control that who can access our admin portal and API. All of these networks are actually coming from the same PGP peering. So you cannot say that I have one peering for the management and one peering for the customer access. They're coming on the same network. We also have to think about the customer workloads. We need to manage them so that we need to have access to it. And we also need to manage the resource providers. The information how the resource provider is working is a little bit not clear yet, but it will get more clear on the coming months. And Anders is going to tell a little bit more about the OMS, that how we are going to do the actual monitoring and monitoring of Azure Stack infrastructure. So how do we integrate to other systems? So when we are using private clouds, we usually have a network access, how we can use it, but in Azure Stack, we don't have it. We have to use the same network and the same kind of way how the Azure works. So we chose to do the model that we will set some tags on the resources. And with those tags, our automation can actually notify that if customer wants to have some service on specific resources, our automation will deploy, for example, agent on it, and then we will create a CIs in our CMDB, and then our operations can actually start managing those servers. So that's one way of doing it. We're using the same kind of mechanism for when we are giving the managed service for our Azure customers. And then, of course, they need to have some way how they can interact with us, and that's our self-service portal. Then, Anders.
Yeah, thank you. So, in the beginning of this whole project, I sat down with Johnny and some other people from Tieto, and we very quickly found out that one of the key reasons why Tieto really needed Azure Stack, because in the perfect world, they could take everything and put it up in Azure and then have the customers run from there. But as Johnny just mentioned, there's a lot of customers that they have that are coming from public sector that has data that simply can't go up into the cloud. But they say at the same time, those customers that say, hey, we have data that can't go to the cloud, by the way, we are also extremely concerned about security. So when someone comes and says, hey, Azure Stack is a black box, mean in the way that you cannot access the physical servers themselves. It's like when you buy a SAN. Normally that SAN, you don't have access to the operating system or anything like that. You get access to the storage. That's it. Look at Azure Stack the same way, or think of Azure Stack the same way, that you only get access to the services that Azure Stack provides, meaning virtual machines or web apps or networks and things like that, where the physical infrastructure of Azure Stack you can actually not get access to, because we are locking that down in a very secure way. So when we look at that, security and compliance was then a very big concern and something that needed to be addressed. And as we mentioned, for legislation reasons or politics, many of these customers can simply not go to the cloud and are very focused on security. So what we're actually doing here with Azure Stack is also we spend a lot of time using technologies that are already available in Windows Server and in other parts of our platform, making Azure Stack very, very secure. Many of you have probably heard about BitLocker. That is an encryption policy that allows us to encrypt data on we started with client, and then we moved on to server where we can encrypt the data. So Azure Stack does that. So if you try to come in and you plug in a hard drive and you try to steal data from Azure Stack, you can't do that because the data is encrypted. But it doesn't only stop there. Very common requirements if you want to audit a system is that communication between different components could be one component of Azure Stack to another component of Azure Stack, that communication is encrypted. So we have done that, plus all the technologies that you know about from Windows Server, like threat protection or antivirus and these great security technologies have all of these have been built into Azure Stack to make it as secure as possible. I'm not going to mention them all, but you can see from a networking perspective, we have locked it down. From a storage perspective, we have locked it down. So any aspects that you can think of in Azure Stack, we sat down and thought about how can we make this as secure as possible. So another thing that Johnny also brings up that needs to be in place when certain customers comes into Tieto is a compliance, to be compliant with certain compliance standards in the market. Now, part of the challenge here is that with Azure Stack, at least from the Microsoft side, we can help with the infrastructure part of a certification or a compliance. But it goes much broader than that. I mean, Microsoft itself, it's hard for us to control that there might be a requirements in the compliance standard that says you need to have a lock on the door into the server room. I mean, we can give you some servers with some software on top, but if you choose to lock down that server room or not, it's really out of our control. But we can help with the infrastructure, and talking to Tieto, they were very aware about this, saying, yeah, we understand that you cannot help us be certified all the way, but at least you can help us with areas that we need to provide data for. So here you can actually see the standards that we are looking at giving the needed data for. So when a customer gets Azure Stack in their infrastructure, very often what happens is that there's an audit and then you need to prove that certain things are in place. So we are taking and mapping the different areas for the infrastructure and saying, hey, if you are in an audit and you need to document saying, hey, is communication from module A to module B encrypted and is there a firewall in place? We're providing that information so it will be easier for you to pass an audit. So the other thing we worked on as part of installing Azure Stack at Tieto was operating and managing the Azure Stack platform itself. So you can put it in there, and all the infrastructure itself, we are helping making sure that you get the right updates and all these things are in place. So we actually want to sit down and talk about how do you operate this on a day-to-day basis. And very quickly, Tieto brought up saying, hey, yeah, we use operations manager today, but in many of our hybrid cloud scenarios, we're actually thinking about looking at OMS and using that as the monitoring tool for our customers going forward. So we very quickly come up with, let's say we sat down and discussed how this could be done, and then we agreed upon making what is very popular these days, a hackathon, where we spent a couple of days together with some of our experts in OMS and also some of Tieto's people, where we kind of brainstormed how could we use OMS in the most optimal way together with Azure Stack. So we came up with 3 scenarios. There's one scenario where tenant wants to monitor their workloads, and tenant can then see the data that they're collecting inside OMS. Maybe I should just pause a bit. Just so we're on the same page here, OMS is Microsoft Cloud tools for managing computers or solutions inside either your own infrastructure or in Azure. So there's a component inside OMS called Log Analytics, which is a tool that helps you monitor different workloads either in Azure or in your own data center, just so we're clear about that when I say OMS. So I apologize for using that acronym, but that is our tool to do that. The other scenario we also wanted to look at was actually how you can monitor your workloads, but from the service provider perspective. Because in some cases, like Johnny here mentioned, they have different IT services that they're selling to their customers. And they might want to optimize those services based on monitoring data they're collecting. So certainly you have 2 entities that wants to have access to the OMS data. You have the tenant themselves that might want to monitor something, and you have the service provider that might want to access data coming from the same machine or the same instance. So you actually need the data to flow 2 ways, because there are 2 different entities that want access to the data. So as I mentioned here, what we then do is we came up with a way, so when you install an agent on something you want to monitor with OMS, Log Analytics, what you do here is that you specify what they call a workspace which is a unique grid, and then on top of that, you specify a key, which is really allowing the agent that you're installing on a machine to send the data in the right direction. So in this scenario here, in the first scenario, we have the service provider that wants to add a virtual machine running so they can start collecting data for the service provider usage. What you can do with this in Azure Stack is that we have what we call ARM templates. How many have heard of ARM templates? Okay, I might just want to spend a few seconds talking about ARM templates then. ARM templates is a way of actually defining applications. And applications here can be applications running on top of virtual machines, or it could be PaaS services. So ARM templates is a standardized way of describing applications that you want to deploy into your infrastructure, so they can be deployed in an automated way and be configured in a standardized way that you describe using these templates. So one of the ways that we can get an OMS agent on a system is actually by having an ARM template. And inside that ARM template, you can say, once you install a virtual machine, please go and install this agent and specify the workplace ID that I talked about and the unique key, so we make sure that the data is routed in the right way into OMS. Now, the tricky part here comes that when your service provider, they say to a customer, hey, provision these new systems, and then we can simply just hard code the ID and the key because that is going to be the same every time. Now, the problem is if you have multiple tenants inside Azure Stack and they have their own workspace, you don't know the workplace ID or the key beforehand unless you want to create an ARM template per customer, per application, which will force you to having hundreds, if not thousands, of templates. But if you could, at the same time, saying, okay, I know about the service provider ID and how to feed that data in because that is the same every time, but then what if I ask the tenant when they deploy, at deployment time, what their workplace ID is and what their key is, then I can certainly dramatically reduce the numbers of ARM templates I'm going to have in my infrastructure. So that is exactly what we did here, and I'm going to show you how you can actually do this. So let me just flip over here to... Just going to connect here, it's going to take 1 second. So what we talked about here was also that we can sit down and then we created a workflows template, or we created an ARM template together with Tieto when we sat over there, and then we said we're going to ask for the information we need once we are actually deploying this agent. So that is what I'm hoping when this system is going to reconnect. Let me just, there we go. So what we're doing here is that we created an ARM template together with Tieto, but I actually wanted many of you guys to be able to go home and do this, where this is a great example of how you can integrate OMS together with Azure Stack. So I actually have a link to a book that is going to be released very soon, where I actually talked with the author of this book that has a scenario that is very similar to the one we used at Tieto. So you can actually start doing this at home, where they would have descriptions of how to create it and walk you through an end-to-end scenario of this. But let me first show you here, I have my Azure Stack health, or the dashboard here. So what I want to do here now is just want to deploy a new VM. So when I go in here, what you can do in Azure Stack is actually that you can add your own ARM templates, or you can add your own items inside what we call the marketplace. Many of you have probably heard about the Azure Marketplace, where you can go in and get, you can buy additional services from vendors in Azure, let's say a Barracuda firewall or an antivirus solution or something like that, in the Azure Marketplace. Now, Azure Stack has the same functionality, but it allows you to actually modify this marketplace so you can add your own templates and your own items into the marketplace in Azure Stack. And that is exactly what you see right here, where you can see this one down here under recent templates I have here. Here, if I click there, I can actually go in and I can deploy a new VM. So when you create an ARM template inside the template itself, you specify what information you would like to ask the person that wants to deploy, in this case, a VM into the infrastructure. So here I can go in and give it a name. And I give it a username here, so it's just give it a password. And down here, I create a user resource group where I'm just going to give it the same as before. So this is pretty much business as usual. There's nothing new under the sun about the information I gave right here. But this is where it gets interesting with the resource settings. Here is some of the new data that I need to provide. So here I need to select the size of the VM. So here I'm just going to select a small VM so I don't take up all the resources on my one node system here. So I'm just going to take this one, click select. Here I give it a DNS name. And then I go OK. Now, here we actually get to the real extension of what we did. So you see, actually, here I've created a button here where I'm, as a customer, can now decide if I want to install an OMS agent as part of my VM being deployed into Azure Stack. So in this case, I go in and I say yes. And what I can do now is I can open up my OMS portal up in Azure, as you can see over here. And here I can just copy my workplace ID, go back here, paste that in right here. And I can go over here and get the key. Those are the two things that I needed, and say copy. And I copy that in here. And here you can then see there's what is called automation hybrid worker. I'm not going to use that. But there's also something in OMS called a service map agent. So here I can actually select which one of those I want to enable. I click OK. And now I get a summary of all the information that I put into the system as part of wanting to deploy a virtual machine. So if I go in now, I then have the option here of this is for partners, but in this case, I'm not getting charged anything. And I can now say purchase. So now it would actually start deploying a virtual machine into this, but this could also have been what Johnny talked about earlier with the IT business services they have with the document system and things like that. So when they onboard a new customer, we can actually make sure that we integrate the OMS agent as part of the install and collect critical data about this application so Tieto can go in and optimize the application itself based on the data that they are collecting. So this is really just giving you an idea of how you can actually take existing management tools and integrate that into Azure Stack, making sure that you can operate the things that you run on top of Azure Stack. And here you can actually see that this deployment here is going to run for a while, and we don't really have time to wait for that. But once this has been installed, what you can see over here, let me just close this one. So if I click here, you can actually see that I have 0 Windows computers connected. But once this install has finished, let me just click away here. It takes a little time. It takes probably 10, 15 minutes. We're not going to have time to wait for that. But then you can see that number would be counted up by 1. And you're now fully monitoring the agent inside OMS that was deployed into Azure Stack. So if you think this is interesting and you say, hey, that is actually cool that I can install agents or OMS agents automatically, you can actually go and purchase this book. It's coming out next month. And it would actually have a full walkthrough of the scenario I just showed you. And it also gives you an excellent walkthrough of Microsoft Hybrid Cloud with, of course, Azure Stack and Azure. So if you want to get a quick ramp up on what you can do and a lot of guidance, I recommend taking a look at that book. So another thing we also did on top of this with OMS was actually that we created another hackathon. And this dealt with OMS log analytics, monitoring Azure Stack itself. So Johnny just mentioned in the beginning when we are launching Azure Stack, We don't have the concept of multiple regions where each Azure Stack stamp or service would be its own region. So if you have multiple regions of Azure Stack, you wanted to have an overview or a single pane of glass where you can actually see the health of each Azure Stack region, right? So you don't want to jump from region to region to region and see if there are any red lights blinking. It would be a lot cooler if you could take that information, put it into OMS, and then have your operations people sit and look at OMS. So that was another scenario we discussed through the project here, where we sat down and we spent 3 days together building a prototype very quickly that you can actually see here, where we installed a VM inside Azure Stack that will go and query the Azure Stack Health API, extracting that data. Then we massage the data and pump that into OMS, where we created a dashboard, which is the one you can see here on the lower right side, where we then showed the different services that are in Azure Stack and what health they're in. So we can actually collect all of that data in a single place and then present the overall health across Azure Stack regions. So this was just a quick 3-day where we prototyped this together with Tieto. There's still some more work that needed to be done, but we quickly realized that this was actually possible. So that was a good experience and learning actually how we can go in there and get a quick health overview of Azure Stack itself across the regions using OMS as another cloud service. So hopefully this gave you a bit of overview on how the things we actually chose to focus on, Microsoft and Tieto Stack into Tieto's data center. So of course there's a few things if you are thinking about going on a similar journey as we did together with Tieto. The first thing we really recommend is going out and kick the tires on Azure Stack by downloading what we call the ASDK, which is the Azure Stack Development Kit. This is a setup you can download from the internet where you can go and install Azure Stack in a mini version just running on one server that you can use as a sandbox environment, where you can go and test the various things that we talked about here today and see if that works according to your requirements for a cloud platform. Also, familiarize yourself overall with Azure. If you haven't worked with Azure before, Azure Stack is going to be very, very similar. So if you want to get started with understanding some of these cloud concepts that we talked about, the ARM templates that I talked about, all of that is available in Azure today. So if you want to get started with that, you can go and just do a test subscription, and then you can play with Azure for some time. And then you really easily familiarize yourself with exactly the same concepts. Azure Stack also gives you the possibility of using Azure AD. So if you're not using Azure AD or Office 365, that might be an idea to sit down and think about how could we use Azure AD, because Azure Stack, one of the install methods is actually using Azure AD. Johnny talked about the naming standards, the certificates that you will need to go out and get. Actually, the installation itself takes about 20 hours, and I think that's actually on the high end, because with the latest one we did, we had a lot of the things being optimized and streamlined, so I even think you can actually do it faster than 20 hours. So, anything you want to add here, Johnny?
Yeah, you actually forgot to talk about the networking. So the networking needs to be ready, otherwise the installation will not be able to succeed. So that needs to be working 100%. So we did a couple of reinstallations because the network wasn't ready, and it's a little bit harder to test that. Is it actually done right or not?
Yeah, no, it's actually a good point. What we spend a lot of time on, also getting experts from Redmond on the phone, was specifically around the layer 3 networking and BGP routing, which to many customers or service providers today is still a fairly new concept. Many are starting to use it, but I think it's not that many customers out there that are fully using BGP and fully using layer 3 network end-to-end in their infrastructure. So there were some concepts here that we needed to kind of making sure we're aligned on both sides. But I mean, once that was cleared out, it was at least something that we had to spend some time on, getting that right.
Take a network guy when you do the Azure Stack installation who understands BGP routing. So that will make your life a little bit easier. But otherwise, 20 hours. You just look when the installation is running, and afterwards, it's fully usable cloud service. I have never seen so fast delivery. So actually, when the first time did the installation, it took us 2 days from the servers in the boxes on the rack that we were able to access and start using it. I have never seen that any of the system can be deployed so fast.
Right. So we hope that this gave you a little insight to how we work with this, how it's running in Tieto's data center today, and hopefully also convinced you that you can also go and install this, and hopefully you also got some ideas about how you can operate this, and how you can manage it, and how you also spend some time on making this platform secure. And that would also make your customers feel that when they put their workloads on top of Azure Stack, that they in fact have a very secure platform to host that on. So I don't know if you have anything to add, but then we can open up for a few Q&A or...
Yeah, from the competence point of view, so you need two kind of competence. You need one kind of competence who operate Azure Stack, and then you need Azure competence who actually does everything on the tenant side. So it's exactly the same thing what they're doing in Azure Stack tenant side. So the same competence can be used. And even if you don't have an Azure Stack at your location, you can actually configure Azure to mimic Azure Stack.
That's a good point. Just to kick the tires on it. We'll be up here if you have any questions or there are things to say, hey, I'm a little concerned about this, or I want to get a little deeper understanding, so come up and talk to us. But with that, thank you very much for choosing this session for today, and also have a great conference and have a great Microsoft Ignite.
Thank you.